Alright folks, welcome back to Dominions 5 Basic Nation Analysis, and this time we're taking a look at Early Age Abysia. I was asked about this nation. A lot of people kind of have the impression that Abysia is a good beginner nation because, at least early game, it's very simple. I don't necessarily agree with that, but let's talk about why. As you can see here, this is my 12 turns of expansion. Abysia, when not opposed, excuse me, as I was effectively not opposed here because my AI neighbors basically did nothing. AI when not opposed expands really well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25 provinces. Now, on the one hand, I didn't have any bad negative events during this time, and obviously I didn't have any bumps or anything, and I picked my targets well, so I was kind of playing a little bit better than I often do in these little expansion phases. On the other hand, this terrain is garbage. This terrain actually limited my expansion pretty significantly because this whole river I can't cross all the way across there, except with my Aussie, who I'll talk about in a minute. This river was a little bit of a hamperment, although it does have bridges, which helps. And then there's river right there as well, none of which I can cross. Especially because Abysia is a Heat 3 nation, and so never, ever, unless you take a big points penalty. Well, it's not a points penalty. You can go neutral Heat Abysia. It's just a terrible idea. Basically, you can't ever cross rivers as Abysia. So, let's talk about Abysia itself and why and how I was able to do this. So, Abysia is, by and large, very heavily armored, expensive in terms of gold and resources, cheap in terms of recruitment points. Mage-wise, your mage lineup is actually pretty awful. It's fairly sad, but there's pluses and minuses to it. In terms of troops, Abyssian infantry, like I said, expensive in gold, expensive in resources, very high protection for the early era. 17 prot is like Maconian hoplite, Heelot hoplite levels of protection, and almost nothing else in the era has that. Abyssian infantry with the flails are the best standard infantry because flails get to attack twice and get a bonus versus shields. Abyssian infantry have terrible defense skills, pretty much universally, because they wear this super heavy armor and they wield these heavy two-handed weapons. But with higher than human hit points and high protection, it's generally okay. The other factor about Abyssians is they all have a heat aura, so they radiate heat. Things that are in close proximity to multiple heat auras can be set on fire, in which case they start taking armor negating fire damage until they die. Abyssians all have wasteland survival, and Abyssians all have 50% dark vision. So these guys I think are the best standard troops. You do have troops with shields, so they have a higher defense skill, they can tank a little bit better. And there's something to be said for constructing Morningstar troops with shields in order to serve as better chaff. Or axes, I think the axes do a lot of damage, but the Morningstars do almost as much, can be piercing 50% of the time, which cuts through prot better, and they get that attack bonus versus shields. So I would probably make the Morningstars if I was going to make one-handed troops. You also have these Salamanders. Salamanders are unfortunately not very good because they're undisciplined. They have the Fire Flare and Bite attacks, which are pretty useful. They have low hit points, moderate to low protection, stats overall not too impressive, and they cost 50 gold each. So that in combination with the undisciplined just makes them, in my opinion, not really worth it. Also, their morale is very low, so they run. They do have firepower, which is a feature that some Abyssian units have, not most. These and their Sacreds and one or two of their commanders have firepower. And firepower works like all other power abilities. It increases your strength and attack skill, and I think defense skill as well. Let's see, it's Heat 2 up here. So here's my Prophet, he has firepower. So you can see his attack skill is up too because of the heat. Yep, his defense skill is up, and his strength is up. So it's sort of like Blood Surge, in that it hits all of these. It doesn't hit precision or combat speed. It does hit combat speed, it increases combat speed. I actually had not realized that. But in any case, the heat power, firepower, makes your units that have that much more powerful than you would think in provinces with Heat 3, which should be pretty much all of your provinces. This is one reason you really want to take Heat 3. You have these units, the Misbred. Some people have had a lot of success with these. Personally, I think they're very flimsy for their cost. They cost a lot of gold, and in terms of durability, they're like slightly larger Zots. They have 17 hit points, low protection. They're size 3, so they're only 2 to a square. They fly. They do, however, hit really hard. Really hard. They have decent attack skill, and they hit super hard. So what you can do is you can use these guys as rear attack shock troops, especially because they also have that heat aura, so they'll set mages on fire, stuff like that. It can be pretty cool. They'll die, though. You have to sort of be resigned to the fact that they'll die. And they, unlike everything else in your roster, cost a bunch of recruitment points. They actually cost more recruitment points than your sacreds. So if you try to spam these guys out, like right now, I have 162 recruitment points. I could only get 7, which since I have high resources, I still can't get many of my other troops. But if I wanted to, I could construct a mix of troops that would give me more bodies on the field. Misbreads can be useful as rear attackers. I don't use them much. Your sacreds, the burning ones, are, well, they're really interesting. They're size 3, but they also have bad formation fighter, which means they effectively count as size 4 for fighting informations. That means they can't have 2 of them in one square. That said, except for that, they're really powerful. Pretty high hit points, high protection, high attack skill, high strength. Double Morningstar attacks, so they get bonuses versus shields and can be piercing. Ambidextrous 2, so they don't take any penalties from them. Berserker plus 3, which means their strength goes up to 19 and their attack skill goes up to 15 as soon as they take damage. And they have a fire shield that deals a little bit of armor-piercing fire damage around them. These guys are solid. They're expensive, though, and like I said, there's only 1 per square, so their attack density is very low unless you mix them with Abyssian infantry. That said, they beat up indies really, really well. Burning ones are very good for expansion, and I would definitely rely on them for expansion. As you can see, that's what I was doing here, and it works super well. I never lost a fight with burning ones. A group of about 10 burning ones will clear any indie province. Mog had 9 here. I think he lost 1 Abyssian infantry. And he just rolled through cataphracts, heavy cavalry, any early era indie except a big pile of barbarians. Burning ones will just rip through. A big pile of barbarians will kill burning ones because they hit hard enough to chew through the high prot. So, gotta be careful about that. In terms of mages, so you've got recruitable assassins, which is cool. In your capital, you have recruitable flying assassins. Unfortunately, you're never going to use them. I'll talk about why. You have warlords, who are your national commanders. Fairly unimpressive. They have good physical stats, but you don't want commanders for physical stats. Beast tamers, who you will never recruit because they're mainly for leading salamanders, and you don't really need salamanders or want salamanders. Then you get into the actual mages. Anathemant salamanders are super overpriced Fire 2 mages, and they suck, but you have to use them, so get used to it. Also, Abyssians have very low max age because of their fire association. Having fire magic lowers your max age, so Anathemant salamanders are almost already old. They will actually become old during the game, which is wild. And they cost 175 gold for Fire 2. They're bad, but you gotta use them. Anathemant dragons, slightly less... I take that back, they're still bad. They have 4 paths for their 260, so their ratio is a little bit better. They're still paying like 80 gold per path, almost. It's not 80, it's, what is it? 4 into 260, 130... Yeah, actually it is, it's 75. They're paying 75 gold a path. I don't count the priest level. Priest level 2 is really not that valuable. These guys are actually kind of cool for you because you have a national spell they can cast very easily, which is fairly decent. However, they straight up are old. They're 40 years old, so they will get sick and die during the game, and they cost 260 gold, and they're slow to recruit. So, once again, you're not going to have many of them because they kind of suck. Warlock apprentices. You can only recruit them in the capital. They are blood 1 and cheap. Normally, you would want to spam these guys as much as possible. However, they can only be recruited in your capital, so you're never going to recruit them. Not once. What you're going to recruit in your capital is these guys. Warlocks. They have Astral 1, Blood 2 for 135 gold, so unlike every other Abyssian mage, they're actually very efficient in terms of gold cost per path. They pay about, 45 gold per path. They have a 10% random that can get them more blood, more astral, or earth or fire. They are adept crossbreeders, which actually is valuable for you. It helps the infernal breeding ritual. You'll see what that means. They are old, but they're cheap. So in your capital, which is the only place you can recruit warlocks, you will spam warlocks forever. Every turn, recruit a warlock unless you have a really pressing reason not to. Recruit warlocks over troops. Recruit warlocks over other mages in other places. If it comes down to recruiting a warlock or building a lab, okay, probably build the lab, but think about it, because warlocks are like your saving grace in the mid and late game, and you should start using them early. You also have Anointed of Ruax, who you will almost never use. They're very expensive, they're slow to recruit, all they give you is fire and earth, and you already have that. The only reason you want them is because they're holy level 3, so they can claim thrones. Also, you can use them to, later in the game, these guys can natively cast, like, Eternal Pyre. You know, the fire global. Okay, you should probably have 1 or 2, but Anointed of Ruachs take away from your Warlock time. And Warlocks are a hugely limiting resource for you, so recruit Warlocks. This is also why you'll never be recruiting Demon Bread. They take capital turns. Don't recruit Demon Bread, recruit Warlocks. They're super important. So, in the early game, you're all about fire magic and you're all about troops. Your troops are very tough, and you can expand very easily. So as you can see here, I wasn't stopped, so I took over 20 provinces. In the mid-game, that stops working for a couple of reasons. First of all, in the mid-game, magic answers start to come up, and once magic is targeting them, burning ones become a lot less impressive. They're very good troops, they still die. They only have 23 hit points. Start hitting them with armor-piercing or armor-negating magic. Catch them in Earth Meld, cast Destruction on them so all their armor falls off. Maws of the Earth to bury them and also do armor-piercing damage. Water Elementals beat the shit out of burning ones. There's a lot of options for killing them once magic comes onto the field. For that matter, early age Olmish troops can take down burning ones just by attacking them, generally speaking. And then especially once you throw Strength of Giants on them or late game Weapons of Sharpness, Abyssian troops stop functioning in the late game because they rely on these early game stats that help them against early game threats. High protection, high hit points, high attack power to hit back. They need a lot of buffs in order to function in the late game, which would be fine, except that as early age Abysia, you don't have access to a lot of buffs. Your buffing magic is super, super limited. You've got a lot of fire, you've occasionally got a little bit of earth, but it's hard to boost, because the only time you can actually boost it with a communion is if you get it on a warlock, or, even Anointed of Ruachs can't, because they can't get, well, they can get blood or astral, they can stitch into a communion and use their earth. So you can sometimes cast earth buffs. You don't get any native air magic for air buffs. You don't get any native nature magic or anything. So you're missing a lot of the toolset. And what you have of the toolset is difficult to use. The only thing you can really reliably cast in battle are fire, blood, and astral spells. And blood and astral spells require you to be taking warlocks away from very important things. So it's rough. You can't help your troops out all that much. What you can do in the late and mid game is shift towards primarily blood. And that's why you want to be recruiting warlocks in every province. In every turn. Every turn in your capital, recruit a warlock. It's turn 12. I've already started blood hunting. I've already got 12 blood slaves going back to the capital. I'm going to hunt the hell out of this province, this province, this province, this province. Money, no object. Any province that I can, I am going to try to stack warlocks on. Research-wise, my first goal is Conjuration 3, so that I can summon lesser fire elementals. As Abysia, you have a hell of a lot of fire gems. You get 6 fire gems per turn from the very start of the game, and that's it. So Smolder Cone gives you 5, Temple of the All-Consuming Flame gives you 1. You should be spending these to summon fire elementals anytime you think that you might be threatened. But you have to work on getting anything else. The other reason, by the way, why fire stops being relevant is because there is a spell, and I think it's an evocation. Yeah, Rain. Rain requires a Water 2 mage and 1 water gem, and what it does is it dampens heat effects. It doubles the fatigue cost of all fire spells. So basically, when somebody casts Rain, if you start casting fire magic, all of your mages are just going to go to sleep or die. They could kill themselves with fatigue damage if you're casting big, expensive spells very easily. So, like, this shuts down your national special effect, the heat effect, which otherwise makes Abyssian troops pretty good, because they continuously fatigue people they're fighting. And it makes your mages suck. So your fire magic, as soon as somebody hits evocation level 2 and cares to cast a spell, your fire magic goes and just sort of splats unceremoniously on the ground. Makes it very difficult, and once more, another reason why you want to be relying on warlocks. For my god, so let me back up for a second and tell you why, before I start talking about the details of the god. So Abysia wants to expand very, very aggressively in the early game, set themselves up in a strong position so they won't be attacked, and then work on shifting to blood like as hard as possible, because blood will save you in the mid and late game if you can get there. In the early game, you're fairly strong because your troops are strong. In the mid game, you are weak as hell because you don't quite have blood active yet in a big way, and your fire mages can be trivially countered by anybody who has water magic, and the counters to your troops have started to come out, so now your troops aren't very important either. Other people are summoning things, casting spells, you're still stuck with fire magic, and it's not very impressive. One possible way to counter this is to rush somebody very, very early and take all their stuff before they have counters to your burning ones and infantry, because burning ones with a decent bless on them are very, very scary, very hard to deal with early on in the game. You can see here, Machaka over here took a Myrmicolion. Myrmicolion would actually probably be beaten down by my burning ones if I brought a bunch of burning ones to attack him. That high damage that many times from the Morning Stars, it would be pretty bad. So my recommendation is take a god who gives your burning ones a pretty decent bless. Take production 3 and otherwise don't really worry about your scales. A special quality of Abysia is that growth and death both affect them only half as much, which makes growth a lot less necessary and death a lot less threatening. I still wouldn't take outright death, especially because I took misfortune on my scales, but leaving yourself at growth neutral or maybe growth 1 is fine. And that saves points to build a bless. So, my god, the Master of Puppets here, the Ozzy. Let me actually shift his shape because he can change shape. So I took Fire 5, Death 4, Blood 4 on Master of Puppets. Now, Fire and Blood are both paths you nationally have. Death you do not, and having a Death Blood Mage is important for a Blood Nation because it means that you can summon vampires once you get up to that level, and vampires can really kind of kickstart your whole thing here. Abysia gets extra Fire Bless points. So when you take 5 Fire Magic on your god, you actually end up with 7 Fire Bless points. So the bless I took was Awe, Blood Surge, Undying +4, and then a little bit of Undead Leadership. Undead Leadership is necessary to lead both these misbred and anything that you crossbreed, which Abysia does in spades, a lot, because they have a special spell for it. Death 4 gives you a little bit more oomph on those sacreds before they die. The Awe, of course, makes your sacreds a lot harder to hurt, especially in combination with their high HP and their high protection, so it helps kind of mitigate their low defense score. And Blood Surge makes them just really scary. Blood Surge in combination with that Berserk. Let's look at this battle in Watronia, and I'll show you what I mean. So we're here in Watronia. Here's the Burning Ones. You can see they've got a Swamp penalty, no heat bonus because it's not hot in this province. We're going to zoom forward, drop the Blessing on them, and they start to charge. So they hit the enemy. They haven't taken any damage yet. This guy right here is not Berserk. Who's Berserk? You're Berserk. So you're Berserk now, so you took a little bit of damage. And you've activated Blood Surge. As a result, his attack skill is now 18. So he's swinging at 19 attack, +2 against anyone with a shield. So 21 attack if you have a shield. Doing 27 damage because his strength has also jumped up. He has a chest wound. He's even lost strength, and it's still 21. So he is now hitting incredibly hard, incredibly often, and his protection is now 20 because of the Berserk. This guy is insanely dangerous at this point. The Blood Surge Berserk combo basically means that your Burning Ones just mulch through almost anything in front of them. There was an Azure Mage in this province, interestingly, and he accomplished nothing. I think he was throwing desiccations at me. So, yeah, we wiped him out with no trouble. 6 Burning Ones and a few Abyssian infantry for chaff. That bless also means your Burning Ones can fight enemy players throughout most of the early and early mid game until real magic starts to come out. Even after real magic starts to come out, Burning Ones with that bless will still do a lot of damage, although they will die. So that bless, for me, I think works. On top of that, the Awe and the Blood Surge gives the Ozzy himself in his dragon form a lot of defensive power. He has pretty high protection. He has a lot of attacks. He's a flying Drakon, is what the Ozzy is. Only certain nations can get him. Abysia and Abysia descended nations can take the Ozzy, as well as Kalem. They're both kind of Persian based, and so that's where the Ozzy comes from, the Deva of Destruction. So the Ozzy is a fantastic expander because for the same reasons as the Drakon, plus the fact that he can fly. And he can shape change into the Great Warlock. So he kind of has all all the benefits of a dragon and a drakon kind of mashed together. He's one of the best expanders in the game, and being able to take him is very, very good. He also has chaos power, so he does a lot better if you have turmoil, which I took turmoil 3 in my Dominion. So in my Dominion, he's just absolutely terrifying. On top of that, as I said, once he shifts back into his regular form, he's Death 4, Blood 4. He can research very well, he can sight search very well for death sights to break me into death, and he can summon vampires later on in the game. And remember, the late game plan is blood. Pretty much just blood and only blood. So, got Conjuration 3, I'm researching down to Blood 3, and I'm researching down to Blood 3 because of this spell, Infernal Breeding. Crossbreeding is a spell that any Blood Nature Mage can cast, and it generates random garbage units. Occasionally it gives you a good one, but not very often. Infernal Breeding, the Abyssian version, is a lot better. It gives you fewer, it's 11 per 25 slaves instead of 20 per 15 slaves. But the ones it gives you on average are pretty solid. They're good, to be honest. And the Hellspawn. And the Hellspawn will actually form a lot of your armies as you advance through the game. And this is why you need a lot of blood slaves pretty early, because it costs 25 per pop. And then, you know, it only gives you so many. So you need to kind of get that going pretty early on. However, of course, like I said, you want to go down blood really hard anyway. Like, blood is your plan. So, Infernal Breeding down to Hellfire, Calling Horrors. Calling Horrors on people is a big part of Abyssia's combat strategies. You do need to buff, you need to get Astral boosters in order to do that, but that shouldn't be too hard. You can either wait until you random an Astral 2, or if you want, you can build a god to construct boosters, or you can buy a Starshine Skullcap off somebody. Usually you can get one to sell one to you. Usually. Not always. Also, as a recommendation, don't sell Starshine Skullcaps to Abysia. It will only enable this. You'll be sad about it, you won't like it. Let's hop over into the Mod Inspector, and I can show you what those Hellspawn look like, so you know what I mean when I say they're pretty good. On top of that, you do have a couple of national summons as Abysia, but you can't really use them. Summon Spectral Infantry summons these Smolder Ghosts, which are pretty solid. I'll show those to you as well, but you need Death for it. Late Age Abysia can spam the hell out of this spell, but Early Age cannot. Pride of Lions requires Nature 2, which you don't have, and it's not really worth casting anyway. Contact Scorpion Man you can, so we'll look at Scorpion Men as well. They're Conjuration 8, and by that time they're not very relevant, so I don't really use them, but they're kind of cool. And then, this is a national spell that you actually do use, Liquid Flames of Ruax, and I'll show you what that spell is too. Your Anathemate Dragons can cast it natively, and it's very, very good. It does a lot of damage, it has a wide AoE armor-piercing attack damage effect, and it does armor-negating fatigue. If you spam this spell, you will be successful, but it requires you to have massed a whole bunch of Anathema Dragons, which usually you won't have done. It's worth recruiting some of them. Obviously, you want some firepower around, but generally speaking, you'll be recruiting these guys outside of your capital, and you'll be recruiting these guys in your capital. Recruit some of the Anathema Dragons, and you can use them to throw Liquid Flames of Ruax and to easily summon a ton of fire elementals. So, there's that. Let's hop on over to the Mod Inspector. Alright, so here we are in the Mod Inspector, and you can see all of the various different Hellspawn you can get. Some of them are not great. Hellbred Horites, bad. These Hellspawn right here, they have a lot of attacks, but fairly low protection in size 3. Some of them are really, really good. These Hellspawn down here, protection 21, high morale, multiple attacks that do poisonous damage. It's very solid. These ones over here, very similar and can also fly. And of course, the Hellbred Giants are almost the stars of the show. These guys appear relatively rarely. You see this crossbreeding multiplier, the higher it is, I think the less commonly they appear. So these guys appear fairly rarely, these guys appear very rarely, these guys are fairly rare. The naked ones are pretty common, but the nice thing about this is most of them have some kind of special ability that makes them useful, like these guys who are salamanders with wings who can fly and higher morale. These guys up here show up quite commonly. They have a Belch Flames attack, which is AoE 1, and they have a flail, and they have a bite, and they have the plate halberd, so they're nice. The Hellbred Giants, of course, are incredibly powerful. They're like Hellbred Anakites almost. Low defense skill, but high protection, high hit points, battle axe that hits like a truck, the gore attack that hits very well. There's a lot of good things going on with the Hellspawn. It is worth spamming the hell out of that spell. Most of these guys have multiple attacks. All of them have pretty high morale. They're good. They are solid units. And they all have, a lot of them have firepower. Many of them have heat auras, although not all. They all resist fire, and most of them resist poison as well. On top of dark vision and all of that. So, Hellspawn, very much worth spamming. Will actually replace your national troops later on in the game, because they're really easy to get in large numbers. If you have a couple of warlocks and a very, very good blood economy, which you should have, as good as you can manage at least, you can churn out 50 Hellbred or so per turn. We can also look at the Smolder Ghost. I don't know why it does that sometimes. It doesn't actually show up. So, the Smolder Ghosts, late Age Abysia gets them a lot more easily with the Summon Abyssian Ancestors spell, which is better. It summons a sacred version, but the standard version that early Age and Middle Age Abysia get, they're not bad. They're ethereal. They're undead. They have this spectral axe attack, which is a magic weapon. It's not like the normal spectral weapons where you get a magic resistance check to negate half the damage. It's just a magic weapon, and it also does fire damage on top of the normal attack. So it's a lot of damage. Smolder Ghosts are fine. You're just not really going to have the resources to summon a lot of them, because you don't have all that much death income, and you don't have many death fire crosspath mages. Unless you find some kind of indie that gives you that, but I can't think of an indie that gives you death fire off the top of my head. There probably is one. I'm sure there is one. There's one of everything in Dominions. I just don't know what it is. But the Hellspawn are the real deal there, and they will kind of form the mass of your armies if you get into the mid-game as you work towards the late-game blood spells. What else were we going to look at here? There was something else, wasn't there? We already looked at the national... We already looked at Liquid Flames of Ruax. And the other national conjuration spells really aren't that impressive. Oh, that's right. We were going to look at Scorpion Men. Scorpion Men. So, this is the Scorpion Man. Like I said, he comes very late in the game, and he's just kind of a big monster. He is sacred, so your blesses affect them. They have fear, and they have a whole bunch of attacks. They've got this Gaze of Fear AoE attack, which is like casting terror on the enemy. They have an Enchanted Sword, which is a magic weapon. They have a Plague Bow, which causes disease when it hits, which is sort of hilarious. It has the damage, but it does high enough damage that it can normally sum through. And then they have 2 natural melee attacks, including the Stinger that does a ton of poison. They're solid. They come very late in the game, and they're expensive. So, like, 12 Earth Gems for this guy, I don't know. I feel like I'd rather take those Earth Gems and summon, like, 15 Earth Elementals, or, cast Army of Lead 3 times, or, you know? I feel like there's other options for it. That said, at least Scorpion Men are easy to summon, and they are very tough, so it might be worth it if you find yourself with an excess of Earth Gems and no real good ways to spend them in the late game. Which is more likely for Abysia than for a lot of nations, because you can find Earth Gems site searching, but you don't have anything above Earth 1 natively. So, possibly. Worth thinking about, but overall, I don't use them much. Now let's hop back into the game. That's most of what I wanted to talk about with Abysia. As I've said several times now, your late game plan is blood. The fire magic will never be more than supplementary. In the early game, it can carry you to an extent, but in the late game, you really need to go deep into blood magic. Fortunately, going deep into blood magic is very, very productive for you. You can bind devils, hellfire. You can get down here, you can bind archdevils very easily, just by empowering some of your fire mages in blood. You can cast Infernal Prison very easily to throw thugs into the Inferno, which means you don't have to deal with them for a few turns, and then if they come back, they might end up somewhere they can't live and just instantly die, which is always cool. You can cast Infernal Forces to summon a whole bunch of devils and imps and stuff. You can get into the Earth magic without too much trouble. If worst case scenario, you empower one guy to Earth 2 and start forging Earth boots. You can bind Demon Knights, summon Ill-Earth Elementals if you really want to, but I would probably Demon Knights and then save up to see if you can get Father Ill-Earth. Pedosian is a great unit. If you looked at Accidental Ascension, you know exactly how tough Pedosian can be. And then you can cast Infernal Crusade, which is a fantastic spell that summons a ton of Demon Knights, and they are very good units. You can also do all the Blood Astral stuff, which not a lot of nations can. Summoning horrors, so you can call horrors, which on the battlefield means these horrors just pop up and start attacking at random. You can send Lesser Horrors, which is a remote attack spell that is incredibly effective. And you can call and send more powerful horrors, including Send Dream Horror, which is kind of hilarious. It just causes unrest until they find the horror, and then they have to fight it, which generally they can kill it once they find it, but it just causes unrest continuously, so it's a kind of a cool little mess you up spell. And then of course you can cast Astral Corruption. So late in the game, if you've gotten to late in the game as Abysia, you lay down Astral Corruption, and now anybody else doing anything except what you're doing with blood and astral magic runs the risk of being eaten by horrors all the time. Note, if you cast this, everyone in the game will hate you. You will become public enemy #1. If you're in a position to cast this, however, you might be able to handle it. And then, of course, if you took the Aussie with Death, you can summon Vampire Lords, and then your blood economy, which will normally be relatively small because you can only recruit from your capital, but once you start summoning Vampire Lords, your blood economy will really pick up. And by the time you can cast this spell, you should have an economy that's racking up 80 or 90 blood slaves a turn at least. So you'll be able to cast it every turn forever from then on. And that's really nice. Once you start churning out Vampire Lords, and then of course the Vampire Lords themselves increase the size of your blood economy, so then you equip a Vampire Lord to summon more Vampire Lords, then you start putting them out 2 at a time. If you focus on that really hard, by turn 60 or 70, you could have a lot of Vampire Lords, at which point you're a very powerful Death Nation. You can also go down here, bind Heliophagi, they can break you into other paths, 3 red seconds to instantly put up fortresses, Blood Vortex to increase your blood income, Damage Reversal, which is sort of hilarious on thugs or super combatants. Yeah, it's nice. Looming Hell isn't very good. I'm surprised that it's level 9, to be honest. It's not super efficient, generally speaking. But the Heliophagi, the Demon Lords, Father Ill-Earth, those are all fantastic. You can't really get Ice Devils. You can get Archdevils very easily, and so you can take those, and they're fantastic as well. Getting into late game blood gives you a ton of options, but you have to get there. And getting there is tough because that mid-game dip in power where your troops aren't quite enough and your magic is really easily countered, that is rough to get through as early age Abysia. In order to get through that, Liquid Flames of Ruox is a decent combat spell. If you can get independent archers, and most nations don't necessarily have to do this, but indie archers like this with short bows, you can cast Flaming Arrows super easily from any of your mages. You can drop Flaming Arrows on them and that makes them fairly effective, but they're not going to hurt your infantry, because your infantry are entirely fire immune as well as have high protection. So, if you have some Abyssian infantry with a bunch of independent archers behind them lobbing flaming arrows, you can do pretty decent work that way sometimes. Once again, it's just an issue of finding a way to make your troops work. Large amounts of Hellspawn will definitely help. Spamming that spell is very good, can be very successful. Getting a hold of magic diversity is a big part of your strategy. So like right up here, I found Lizard Shamans, Astral Nature Mages. I've sat my Prophet on this province for 3 turns now, working mages up here. I have this air mage I got from a random event who I'm going to be using to site search. But he's just been sitting here for 3 turns, making sure that no random event or anything comes and takes this province, because for Abysia, Lizard Shamans are incredibly useful. They give you nature magic. They give you efficient research, which you otherwise don't have. All of your research, except for your warlocks, is god-awful. Anathemate Salamanders, 175 for 9. Oof. 260 for 13. Oof. It's bad. So, efficient research, really big deal, because you need to get up into high-level blood. Nature magic, really big deal. Getting nature magic into your communions and sabbaths, super big deal. that opens up a ton of options for you. As Abysia, go to war over Lizard Shamans, go to war over Sages, fight for independent mages. Jade Amazons are fantastic for you. Fight for independent mages that can give you more magic diversity, because lack of magic diversity will get you killed if you're not careful. Having only fire and blood and a tiny little bit of astral, it's not going to do it. You need more. And if you can get more, if you can set yourself up with a strong early game expansion to weather the storm of the mid game where people are hunting for targets, then you might be able to go into the late game with a strong blood economy. Like I said, I've already started this. That's just 2 mages. They're cranking out 12 slaves a turn. I can put mages in these 2 provinces, that province, hunt the hell out of them. I've got a fort over here, so I can work some warlocks around this way, grab that province. What else is a good province? That province is a good one if I can grab it, although that's that is, of course, a throne. This province down here, once I get across the river, even in the early age, there are good hunting provinces around. And I would say, burn them to the ground. Hunt the hell out of them. Build up the blood slaves, start early, never stop, and as you advance, you'll turn those blood slaves into your chaff, you'll turn them into your flying attack rear troops, you'll turn them into your vampires in order to increase the strength of your blood economy and break you into death in a real deep way, and at that point, you're in a pretty solid position. So, hope that's helped. I have never finished a game as early age Abysia. I've tried to play them a couple of times. I've never gotten to the end game. That mid game slump is murder. If you're not careful. If you have ended a game or won a game as early age Abysia, leave a comment. Tell me about it. Talk to me about what it was that you did and why. I think this god build is pretty solid. The Aussie here with the fire, the death, the blood, vampire summoner, decent blesses for your sacreds. I really think having that awake expander is valuable, but Abysia does have strong enough expansion off their sacreds that they could go with a dormant or imprisoned god if they wanted to, or just an immobile researcher, which might be helpful because, as I said, their research is awful. You know, it's turn 12, I've hit level 3 in one thing, and I'm researching at 55 points a turn. So, might be worthwhile to have a researching god. I like the extra expansion because I think Abyssia's game plan is going to depend on being really strong right out the gate. But, understandably, other people might disagree. Early Age Abysia is weaker than the other ages of Abysia, in my opinion, because they rely a lot more on the fire magic and they don't have good access to astral and blood. Late Age Abysia has a lot more blood and a lot less fire, and also a little bit of death, which makes them a lot stronger. Middle Age Abysia, haven't really played them. Middle Age Abysia won Honor, a game that I was in, and I was impressed by that, but they did it mainly off the strength of finding a lot of good independent mages and exploiting them heavily. So I'm not sure that's really a nation strength as much as a player strength. But in any case, thanks for watching. If you liked this video, leave a like on it, let YouTube know. It helps tell me what I should do next and helps tell YouTube what they should show to people, which is always fun. If you really enjoy what I do, consider supporting the Patreon and or joining me on my Discord server where we sit around and chat about stuff like a bunch of huge nerds, and sometimes I organize games and such. I'm actually planning to start another subscribers game pretty soon. It's looking like I might get knocked out of some of my games soon, as happens. And so I'll be looking for, have some space to start up another subscribers game. So in any case, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.